Welcome to the Business Blueprint, where entrepreneurs and business leaders learn how to work smarter, scale faster, and build better.
Hello and welcome to episode 3. I'm your host, Joe Sandine, and today we are without my partner in crime, Clay. Clay's off at a trade show with our sales team at OnSharp, so I will be manning the show on my own today, but I do have a guest in the house. But before we get started, I just want to recap. Last episode, we talked about EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it really is just a way as an entrepreneur or business owner to have a system for which to run your business, keep you organized. I've always been a big believer in whether you run EOS or any other system, you need some form of a blueprint and a roadmap for running a successful business. So in last week's episode, we talked about the first 3 of the 6 components with EOS, which are vision, people, and data. And this week we were going to cover the next 3, but I took a little bit of a U-turn here, and I'm going to table that for episode 4. So and 2 weeks from now, we will talk about the other 3 components: issues, process, and traction. But today we're going to talk about mentorship a little bit. And, when I started OnSharp 25 years ago, one of the most important things that I realized was how important it is to have a mentor in your business. I really struggled in those first 3 years, I think, to have direction. And it wasn't until I met my to-be wife in college and then got introduced to her family and met her father, Mike Bollinger, that I really felt like I kind of found the right path in business. And it was all about having a mentor. It was all about having someone who's been there, done that before, that can really help you both give you advice and just you getting to see how they operate. It's just so valuable to be around other people and see how they make decisions and how they operate. And it was just such a valuable component to my business career. So I would have never gotten as far as I have without having that great mentorship and then having an open mind to actually, take the advice of your mentor and follow their lead and actually implement some of those things. So I'd like to start by introducing Mike Bollinger. So I'm going to Mike's had a long career as an entrepreneur, and I know I'm not going to touch on everything about Mike, but I'm just going to give a quick little intro. So Mike earned both his bachelor's and master's degree in accounting from UND, and he went on to become a CPA. After working in a regional accounting firm, Mike opened his own public accounting practice. After several years, he went on to start up or purchase a wide range of companies in manufacturing, home improvement, agricultural equipment, building tools, and even casual furniture. Today, Mike and Peggy and his 3 girls own and operate Western Products and several other home improvement businesses, and they're also involved in both commercial and residential real estate and development. So, Mike, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, so here's where I want to start. So I was reading this morning an article from 2018. So you received the Bismarck State College Alumnus of the Year Award in 2018. And when I was reading that article, I thought the first half of it was fitting for kind of how I want to come into this conversation today. So I'm gonna read some bits and pieces from that article, and then I'm gonna ask you a question. So here's how it goes. Mike wasn't much of a student. His dad had only an 8th grade education and kept the family afloat delivering mobile oil products. His mother died when he was 14 years old, and his older sister at that time was only 17. The family didn't have a lot of money. In high school, Mike worked several jobs, but he didn't have a lot of direction academically. Then during his senior year, Mike's life took a significant turn. He took a bookkeeping class, and 3 weeks before graduation, he met his future wife, Peggy, and he fell in love with both. Now here's kind of the kicker, what I want you to pay attention to. Here's what Mike says. I hung around with Peggy, and she was a good student. I decided I needed to start studying. And so I would argue Peggy was really Mike's first mentor in life, kind of getting him on the right path and really setting the stage for where Mike went with his life. So Mike, my first question for you, how instrumental was that moment in your life, and how did it set the stage for where you're at today?
Well, I think, first of all, let me say thanks for those kind words before. When I first met you and you wanted to marry Tony, my only word of advice was, you better treat her good, and you've done a great job with that.
Well,
you guys are a great partnership, the 2 of you. But back to Peggy, if I would not have met Peggy, I probably wouldn't even be sitting here today. She's my partner, my best friend, and she was the one that I felt I better get on the right path in order to win her over, which we did, and we've been married. We just had our 55th wedding anniversary, and we worked hard together, and we both had nothing. She was 2 years younger, so while she's finishing her high school, I needed to go to college. And I received a letter from Bismarck Junior College. I tell this story all the time. And when I read the letter and it said that I was accepted at BJC, I felt like that smart kid that just got his letter from Harvard. I had a chance. I had a chance to start. And back in those days, I never talked about some of my first classes, but I actually had to take a couple of what we called bonehead classes that didn't even qualify for college credit just to get my grades up. And again, it's all because of Peggy, and I give her full credit for that.
So how do you think your life would have been different if you wouldn't have met Peggy?
I did enjoy accounting. I could be just an accountant for a company, which would be a good job. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in my lifetime I've helped a number of people, go into accounting, whether they were students and trying to figure out what to be when they go to school and graduate. I've had a lot of conversations with people or people that I've been associated with in business to help them grow too. But, our life together, we had 3 daughters, and now we've got 3 son-in-laws, and we've got 10 grandchildren, and that's been very important to both of us. And so we've kind of built our life around that and our business.
So let's talk about, aside from Peggy, who are some of your other important business mentors in your career, and how did they help you?
Well, a long time ago, I should probably add this, that after my 11 years in public accounting, I ended up buying out a client of mine, which was Western Products. And a gentleman's named Peter Shook, we wrote up a contract that said, anytime within the next 6 years, I can retire him. But I kept him the entire 6 years. He took a salary in that period of time, but I felt the amount that he took for his salary was not as important as me keeping him around to learn the business thoroughly, and not just learn all the good things he had in his business that I learned from him, but it was also the things that I could see that he was making a mistake on that needed to be changed or altered. And we had 2 divisions to it. We had a wholesale and a retail. So he kind of ran the retail while I ran the wholesale. And then as time came, at the end of the 6th or 7th year, I ended up buying him out. But there were a number of people in my days in public accounting that I consulted with, and some of them were extremely successful people, extremely successful. And some of them just didn't want to listen, or maybe didn't know, maybe they were 2nd or 3rd generation, and they ended up losing their businesses. So from my standpoint, I learned just as much from their failures as things not to do as things to do on the positive side. I'll tell just a real quick story. Peter and I were out Peter Shook, the guy that I bought out, we were out for lunch one day, and he said, "So Mike," he said, of all the people you've met, kind of similar to what you're saying, who do you think you learned the most from? And I think he probably wanted me to say, "Why, you, Peter." But I thought for a second, and I gave him the name of somebody that filed for bankruptcy. And he looked surprised at me, and I said, "The reason I picked that is because now I know some of the pitfalls on the downside of business that will never happen in my lifetime because I'm aware of that."
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I think a lot of times we think about all the successes that you can learn from somebody, but I think one of the best things you can learn is seeing other people's failures and what they learned from those failures, so that you can. I mean, it's tough. I mean, when you're young in business, it's easy to fall into some of those pitfalls, and you can be a little bit stubborn. And when you have the opportunity to see other people's failures and learn from that, it can really save you a lot of grief.
Absolutely. And it doesn't cost you any money.
Exactly. Yes, a lot cheaper. All right, so it's time for a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to dive into how Mike got started as a business owner and what he learned about building and maintaining healthy business relationships. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I'm your host, Joe Sandine, without Clay today, but joined by Mike Bollinger, my mentor, my father-in-law, and a man that I've learned a lot from in business over the years. So before the break, we talked a little bit about Mike's, what I call his first mentor, his wife, Peggy, and how she got him on the straight and narrow path. We talked about the importance of mentorship, but I also want to just talk generally about the importance of building and maintaining healthy business relationships, Mike. And I want to do it through the lens of you buying Western products and kind of that process that you went through to work to get financing and buy the business. So maybe you can just kind of walk us through how you went from being a CPA to having your own practice and then buying a home improvement company and how you made that decision, why you did that.
Sure. So we'll start with my years as being a CPA. It was about 11 years in total. But the one thing I always enjoyed, whether I was working on the tax side or the audit side, and you're dealing with numbers every day, but more importantly, it was the people that owned the business. And I would always watch what they did. I would have conversations with them. I'd ask them questions about how they ran their business. And there were a number of them, and I can call them all mentors. But as time kind of progressed, and I had this opportunity to, Western Products was the first company that I left for after I sold my practice. When I started there, as I said earlier, Peter Schuck, I could have retired him in 1 year, but I wanted to keep him around to learn more and more of the business. And at that time, we had 3 wholesale branches as well as the retail selling in-home products. But I had a lot of experience in the wholesale side of business, so we started to expand it. And I started hiring good people, and we'd work together. And we had branches going from Minneapolis all the way out to Spokane and down through Denver. And it grew rather rapidly. But then at the same time, as Peter was getting older, I knew that I needed to jump into the Western product side, which was the in-home sales. And so I kind of wore 2 different hats for the long period of time. And after a period of time, we retired Peter. But that was just the Western products. From there, we grew it to, in Wahpeton, there was a equipment manufacturer of tillage equipment, which was in bankruptcy. And I bought it out of bankruptcy and used some of the same business practices that we've used and brought that back and got it going. We did that also to Homecrest in Wadena. Both businesses are still running today. We don't own Willridge. But at the time I was buying, I'm going to go back to Western Products for a minute. At the time I bought Peter out, our agreement was a cash deal. Because I'm his CPA, I can't ask him for credit at the time I'm putting an agreement together to buy him out. And so we had an agreement that I had to take him out for cash. But I assumed all along he would take credit. At the end of the day, he didn't want to do the credit, he wanted the cash because we built this business up and he kind of wanted some more money out of the deal. So with my experience as being in public accounting, I went to Minneapolis and met with 3 asset-based lenders. And without getting into too much technical here, they loan against your assets that you have, your inventory, your receivables, and they give you a percentage of that, and that's the maximum amount of the loan. So in my time in Minneapolis, I met a group from National City Bank who said they can make decisions right there in their office, and as opposed to the other 2 parties that I went to. At that time, I made the decision to go with them, National City Bank. And as we got to the point of determining the day that I'm buying Western Products out, we were about $1 million overline. So we did not have the assets to support the extra $1 million. And so then I had to go to work and figure out where's that $1 million going to come from. But all of our payables were on 30 days. And normally what people do when you buy a business, they'll go in and they'll try to get the vendor down on price. I didn't ask them to reduce their price. I just said, why don't you give me 90 days terms instead of 30? I just tripled my cash flow. And believe it or not, 6 months later, we're now going through the winter season, so there's early buy that with terms 6 months out. So at the same time, I'm bringing in inventory for the next summer that isn't due until the summer season hit, and we're already starting to sell product. So that worked out rather good, and it was something that came from my background as a CPA.
Yeah, I was going to say, being a CPA by trade, obviously, you knew a lot of the things that you could do to make the deal come together, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I feel like us younger guys sometimes don't totally understand the relationships in banking that are so important when you run a business. I mean, in today's world, everything's online. So I think a lot of people just think, oh, I'm going to do everything digital. I don't need to have anyone at the bank that I really need to have a strong relationship with. But I've learned from you over the years how important it is to have really good, strong banking relationships and have transparency and really build trust. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So when I got the asset-based lender to make the deal with me, I had never, ever heard of an asset-based lender that lent money to a company where that company was not required to do an audit. I never had to do an audit because they trusted me.
So how do you feel like you built that trust to make that to get them to make that decision?
Having a number of conversations over a 1 month period of time, them knowing my background, showing them what we do on a monthly basis to put our financial statements together, to operate our company. But in all my years in public accounting, there was never an asset-based lender that did not require an audit, and we did not have to do an audit. But to take it a step farther, then as we grew, we did local banking. And it's very important to understand local bankers and determine who really is there for the long run. A lot of banks are just looking for a loan or want you to do maybe a building mortgage with them. But if you're young and you're building a business, you want to be with a banker that if you have some tough times, they're there for you,
right?
And they trust you. And the companies that I've been dealing with now for 40 years locally are the same bankers I use today. And I might challenge them on a rate. If they have a rate and somebody comes to me for a lower rate, I'll ask them, can you meet this, or where are we at on that? The bank has to make money, but you want a fair deal. So It's really more about fairness than anything else. And I have been on some boards where might have had a banking relationship with a company for a number of years, and all of a sudden another bank wants their business, and they come in and maybe lowball an interest rate, and then the company's thinking about making a switch. And I always say to them, what happens if you get in trouble? Yeah. The new guy's going to run.
Yeah.
The old guy's going to be there for you. And I think that's really an important thing.
Yeah, it shows you the value of, long-term relationships are much more important than just in the moment of the deal sometimes.
A half a point doesn't mean anything if a banker's going to call a loan on you, as opposed to working out the details of it.
Right. So what would you tell someone who's thinking about buying an existing business today? I think a lot of people, I'm going to say my age and younger, I think buying a business sounds pretty daunting versus I think everyone kind of assumes, I'm just going to start a business from square one. Can you just kind of give a little advice to someone who's maybe thinking maybe I should buy a business instead, and how would I put that together?
The first thing, and I heard this years ago, but I didn't understand it at the time. Because, when you deal with numbers and you deal with businesses and you think you maybe know more than you do, whatever business you're looking at getting into, make sure you study it and you know it inside out.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. You know the products, you know the distribution, you know the accounts, you know the territory. That's so important because that's where people fail a lot.
And obviously your experience, you got to work with Western Products as a client, then you went in-house, you got to work alongside Peter for many years. Obviously you were able to build up that experience and understanding of the business to know, hey, this is something that I can take to another level.
Yes.
Yep.
But the one thing that you have to add to that is you better be prepared for hard work. if you don't give it your all,
Yeah.
you may be successful, but half as successful as you could be if you give it everything you got.
Yep. Great point.
And that might mean that you might have to work at night. And it might mean that you have to give in on some things that the bank wants. Or I remember a time when we had a branch in Spokane and I had a manager there that quit. And I didn't have anybody lock the doors. I mean, think about that.
Yeah, you have a lot of issues you have to worry about as the owner that you don't when you're not.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a break, but up next we're going to talk about another topic, home ownership in America for young people and what needs to happen to create more activity in the market and get more young people owning homes. Stay with us. All right, and welcome back. This is the Business Blueprint. We're talking today with Mike Bollinger, my mentor and father-in-law. In the last set there, we had some good discussion about Mike's process of buying a business and the importance of relationships on the banking side with people in business. For Mike's situation with Peter, the guy he bought the business from, and just keeping him around to learn and understand the business. And the point Mike made in the last set was it's just really important if you're going to buy a business, you really understand that business inside and out. So that's great advice. I want to move on to something a little bit different. So with Mike being in the whole home improvement space, it seems harder than ever for young people to buy a home these days. Interest rates are still pretty high. With that, there's not as much building activity. People don't want to move because they don't want to give up their low interest rates. So we're really at a tough spot for young people from a home ownership perspective. So Mike, my first question, from your experience in home improvement, what are you seeing about the state of home ownership? What's your perspective on what's going on today?
I think, Joe, that right now there's not a lot of movement because what's happened in the last 4 years, interest rates have gone up and they've basically doubled. And when interest rates double, that almost doubles your payment, your principal and interest payment. And I think that if we could get another point and a half reduction, it would be enough to get a lot of movement. And when that hits, our country, a huge part of it runs on construction. And I'm not just talking homes, I'm talking multifamily, I'm talking commercial buildings. There's a lot of projects that are just put on hold right now because you can't make them work based on double interest. But I think there's opportunities. There's some things that are being talked about this 50-year mortgage. I think there's a lot of people on what I've just listened to on the news that are kind of poo-pooing it. But I think back to when Peggy and I started, we had no money, and interest rates were 10.25%. Houses were less, obviously. That's 40, 50 years ago, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, we can't even fathom 10.25%, 12, 15% interest rates. That just seems out of this world to us, these days.
Well, back in my days of public accounting, prime was at 20.5, and some people were 5% over prime. So put the math to that.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot. But on this 50-year mortgage, I think that there's a lot of positives to it. And again, it goes back to when Peggy and I bought that first home. We had no money. I borrowed $2,000 from my dad. We bought a house that was in bad shape, but we could fix it up. And after we bought the house, the realtor told Peggy that we were the only two people that ever went past the kitchen. Nobody even went into the house. It's the only house in the neighborhood that didn't have a garage. But we were able to overcome that with just grit. I mean, we'd work at night and we'd wallpaper, and I built the garage myself and cleaned up the yard, and there's all those things. But what we needed to do was have the ability to just buy it.
Right.
And so we were in it, we fixed it up, and back then we made $10,000 on the house, took the money and put it into a little bit bigger. The second one was a 4-level split. Did the same thing to it. And that's how you start out. But if you can get young people that are aggressive and want to do this, let them have a 50-year mortgage. It doesn't, I mean, how many people do you know have lived in their house on a 30-year mortgage for 30 years?
No,
I don't know anybody.
Pretty rare, yeah.
Pretty rare. But you could have a 50-year mortgage and put a 30-year balloon on it. You could end it that way. So there's a lot of things you can do. You could have a 50-year mortgage with 10-year rate adjustments. I mean, there's so many different things. But it's that initial cost to get into that house, to make that down payment be small enough in order for people to afford to go into
Well, yeah,
it.
and I mean the side effect or the repercussion today is everyone just becomes a renter. Nobody builds equity. I mean, I think that you made a comment to me earlier that maybe you don't make as much equity in the house, but at least you make some, and you're a homeowner, and you get people are just priced out today, and it's an unfortunate thing. I mean, I think of when we bought our house in 2005, and we're an anomaly. We're still in the same house, and that we probably will stay there forever. But, I remember it feeling like a pretty tough decision and a big stretch at the time. But, as you get older too, your income potential only increases. So, that number gets to be a smaller and smaller number in the grand scheme of things as you make more money. And then you just got to put work into it. I think a good point you made too is you got to be willing to get your hands dirty, put some blood, sweat, and tears into it. And that's really what can build the opportunity. But you can never have that opportunity if you couldn't buy the house in the first place.
That's correct. And, there was an expert on TV saying, do you know what little money you have for a principal payment if you stretch it out 50 years? It's not that principal payment where you're going to build your equity as much as the grit that you put into the project. The hard labor you put in fixing it up to make it be worth more money. That's where your equity is going to come from.
Yeah, absolutely. So another idea they're floating around is some way for you to be able to essentially take your interest rate with you if you were to sell your house and move it to another mortgage. What do you think about that concept?
I'm on the fence on that one because I think the problem you have, if you've got a 30-year mortgage and it's a fixed rate, and the banker or the institution, the financial institution that's giving you the money has to know that if you can take it with you and that mortgage is going to be there for 30 years, what interest rate is he going to use to blend for the ups and downs over the next 30 years? How does he determine that? Where they know that if they give you a fixed rate and you go in a house and you only stay in it for 7 years, they're only obligated at that lower rate for 7 years if interest rates have gone up. Mm-hmm. And everything kind of starts over again. So I think it's a great deal if for some people, but all in all, I think reverting back to my thoughts on a 50-year mortgage with a 30-year balloon, it's only a 30-year mortgage. It's just the payments are a little bit smaller up front,
right,
so they can get into that house. That's the key. Get them into that house.
Right. So aside from the two concepts we've talked about, what does Mike Bollinger have spinning in his head for other ideas? Do you have any other crazy ideas for how to get the home ownership going for the young people?
I think that it would be nice if we had one more small cut before the end of the year, maybe a quarter point. It doesn't do it. It doesn't bring it low enough. But I think back to when Peggy and I started, it was 10.25% interest, and we still did it. So if rates right now are in the low sixes, boy, if they could be at 5.9, it might just help the mentality of people to think, well, we're in the fives now, so maybe we can afford that house. And if they approach it from the standpoint that they're not going to buy the Taj Mahal and they're going to get something that they can live in and maybe do some work in it in order to build some equity, take a chance and do it.
Yeah, I think a big piece too is, in today's world, everyone's looking at social media and it's making it look like everyone's got a fancy house and fancy cars and this and that. And I just, I think back to when I was an entrepreneur and I was young. You just got to make some sacrifices. You got, when your buddies go out drinking at the bar every night, you stay home and you work, or you work on your house, or, when you're young, you just got to be able to put in the energy. Because that's what you have the most of from an asset perspective is you have your time in your hands and your physical ability to do stuff. So I think maybe everyone's just got to, look at your situation and say, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices. And we kind of live in a country where, especially when you talk about politics and government, everyone wants a magic bullet answer without having to feel any pain. And I think just sometimes in life, you got to go through the pain.
And you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
On our first house, when we bought it, again, we had no money to fix it up. And I needed a wheelbarrow. But we had 2 daughters born now, and they needed a radio flyer. little wagon. So what did we do? We bought the radio flyer, and I think I threw a blanket in it, and I used that to put my rocks in it as my wheelbarrow. So you figure
Yeah.
stuff. You got to think it through. You can, and everybody that wants to take the time to think it through, you'll figure something out.
And you know what I love about hard times is they make for really good stories when you get older. Can you tell the beans and corn story? Can you, please?
So in our first house, we had no money. And so, well, before we had our first house, we're still in Grand Forks, and we're renting in an apartment as we're finishing our college days up there. My sister called and said on a Sunday evening, and said, "So what'd you guys have for dinner?" And either Peggy or I said to my sister Marilyn, "Well, we had beans and corn." And she paused and said, "What else?" And we said, "That's it. That's all we had in the house." And so then when we bought our first house, we thought, we're going to start whenever we move, whether we build a house or buy a different house or whatever, our first meal is going to be beans and corn. And we have done that at every home we've moved from, whether it's our lake place or not. I do remember at the lake, you might have been part of that one. You guys thought this is kind of weird that we're out in the fire. We've got beans and corn going on the fire pit, and that's kind of it. But it kind of tells it to Peggy and I that, look, this is where we started, and we both worked really hard to make it work. And smart. You got to think. You can't just work hard and not think about progress. You got to be making progress when you think about it. Just working hard doesn't do it, but there's got to be progress in whatever you do.
Absolutely. All right, it's time for our last break. When we come back, Mike's going to share with us some of his tips for getting started in business today. You're listening to The Business Blueprint. Welcome back. My name is Joe Sandine. I'm on with Mike Bollinger, my father-in-law and business mentor today. We've had a lot of great discussion around Mike's start and kind of how he got going with Western Products. We talked about home ownership in America today and, maybe some of the things we can do to get young people into homes and maybe unlock a little bit more activity on the building side. And now we're going to just talk about some general tips in getting started in business. So whether you're going to buy a business, you've been dreaming about starting a business, Mike's been through that. He's an entrepreneur that's gone through hard times. He's built businesses. He's acquired businesses. He's learned a lot of things by watching other people have successes, make mistakes, all that stuff. So Mike, what are the top 3 things that you think someone just needs to think about if they're thinking about starting a business today?
That's a tough one because I could think about 20 of them. But I think if I had to pick in the top 3, a person needs to ask themselves if they understand finances in general, because they need to know enough in order to know if they need to finance the business. And once the business is in operation, do they know how to read a financial statement? Do they know what to do in a financial statement to be successful? If things are tough, what are the key points you got to look at, and how do you dive into your business in order to figure that out?
So I'm going to stop you there. I think that ties well into your advice when it comes to school, which is take as much
accounting as you can stand.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've told that to teachers that at UND that were my college teachers. Is after I graduated, I was back in UND talking to a couple of them, and I said, I tell every student that goes to college that I run into that's saying, yeah, I'm going to college. What are you going into? Healthcare. And I'll say, do you like accounting? Well, I don't know. And I'll say, take as much accounting as you can stand.
Yeah. Because
someday that could have an impact on your life. You might operate a business. Maybe you don't like healthcare and you move on. Maybe you become a doctor and you have your own independent practice.
Yeah. And I think in today's world, I think entrepreneurship is a increasing option for people, especially, with AI and changing business roles. And I think a lot of people are maybe looking more closely at starting a business of their own. And even if you don't, understanding accounting principles is good for your personal finances too.
Absolutely. And, in today's world, I haven't paid a lot of attention to it, but I think there's a real shortage of CPAs out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think starting salaries for CPAs are getting close to 6 digits in some areas.
Wow.
So it's good.
Yeah.
But even if you don't go on your own, as you just said a minute ago, just about everything in life deals somehow with finances.
Yeah.
And so get to know your finances. And the other thing I tell them when I say, no matter what you're going to do, maybe you like accounting at that point and you become a CPA. And you practice for a period of years and then decide to go off and do something on your own. So that it's just, the opportunities are just unlimited.
One thing I always found interesting is over the years as I've met other business owners, how many of them really just run the business based on what's in the checking account versus whether they're actually making money or not. And so it really hit me pretty hard. And obviously being around you as well, I better understand how to read a P&L and a balance sheet and what those things mean. And going back to banking relationships, your banker's going to expect that you understand your numbers too. So you're not going to fake it with the banker.
Earlier today when we were talking about it and that I was not a good student, when I was a senior in high school, I needed to take one more class. So I started asking around, what's an easy class to take? I need one more class. And somebody said bookkeeping. And I took a bookkeeping class. And I was the kind of guy that I always had a job in order to make some money. And I worked in a gas station. And we had a practice set that you had to go through, debits and credits and all this stuff. And at the end of the class, the instructor, this is in high school now, handed out a brochure about becoming a CPA. And I enjoyed the class so much, I looked at that brochure and I said, I should be a CPA. Had no idea what it even was. But it really helps you if you like business and you think someday you're going to be in business. There's nothing that beats taking as much accounting as you can stand.
All right. So lesson number 1, understand finances. Lesson number 2.
If you're gonna buy a business and obviously it involves sales, where are the sales going to come from?
Yeah, you need to wear the sales hat.
You have to wear this in. Even if you're not going to be the salesman, you have to know if the salesman's going to do a good job. And starting out, you may not know that. At Western Products, I had no idea. But I did have a conversation with Peter one time, and in that conversation, we had this little back and forth, and he said, well, Mike, you've never sold anything. You've never sold siding. And I said, no, Peter, I never have sold siding. But you know what I had to sell? All my clients, going to them and having them take me on to take care of their finances, those people trusted me, and I didn't have to show them anything other than my abilities. That's harder to do than to show them a piece of siding. In
reality, we're selling ourselves every day to people.
Absolutely.
You know? And I always go back to, when I talk about sales, and this is the best experience I ever had. When I was in high school, I sold shoes at an athletic store, and I learned how to, I took it as a challenge. We had contests, who could sell the most shoes off the sale table. And, I always found it as a challenge. How can I get this person to buy 2 pairs of shoes off the wall instead of one? So, I think having fundamental sales experience is so important when you're going to start a business or buy a business from somebody else.
And you'll learn along the way.
Yeah.
But it's sure good to have those basics in place when you buy the business.
Absolutely. All right. Item number 3, Mike.
Item number 3 would be let your employees know you have their back. It's so important that they're working hard for you. They're part of the team. And whether they have a personal problem or they have an issue at work or they don't understand something or they're not very good at something, your job isn't to criticize them, it's to pick them up and try to train them to do that. And nobody's perfect at anything, including us. So we just always try to get better at what we're doing, and you have to help your employees grow through the business.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike, for coming on. This was a great conversation. You've been a great mentor to me, and will continue to be, and I look forward to that. So that's it for today's show. Next week, or in 2 weeks on episode 4, we'll go back to EOS and talk about the last two components of the entrepreneurial operating system. You've been listening to the Business Blueprint. Have a great week.